I want you to try something for me. If you can, just close your eyes for a second, but please, if you're driving, do not close your eyes.
Definitely don't do that.
Yeah, no, seriously. But for everyone else, imagine you are standing on a street corner, maybe in the middle of a huge metropolis, let's say Midtown Manhattan or the city of London or Chicago. You're just standing there. You can feel the wind, you can hear the traffic, and you look up. What do you see?
Well, the obvious answer is the skyline, right?
Yeah.
You see concrete, acres and acres of glass, steel beams going up into the sky.
Skyscrapers. Yeah.
Massive shopping centers, maybe one of those sprawling apartment complexes that just takes up an entire city block.
Exactly. You see the physical city, the hardware. But here's the thing. For this deep dive, I want to hand you a special pair of glasses. We'll call them finance glasses. And the moment you put these on, that skyline, it just completely changes.
Oh, yeah.
Those buildings aren't just piles of concrete and steel anymore. They're not just architecture.
No. Through those glasses, they look like something else entirely. They look like, I don't know, financial instruments.
Precisely. Every single one of those towers, every mall, every apartment block, it represents a massive, massive bundle of debt. And that debt is wrapped up, it's sliced into these tiny little pieces, and then sold to investors all over the world.
We're not just looking at buildings. We're looking at securitization.
That is the word. And that brings us right to the topic we are really going to unpack today. It's an acronym that, it completely dominates the commercial real estate world, but most people outside of high finance have probably never really looked under the hood.
We are talking about Commercial Mortgage-Backed Securities.
Or CMBS.
CMBS.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds like the driest, most technical topic you could possibly choose. But here's our mission today. Yeah. We want to prove that this is actually the hidden operating system of the modern city.
That's a great way to put it. It's the machinery that decides what gets built, what stays open, and, who actually owns the places where we all work and shop.
And it is a machine that operates by a completely different set of rules than, say, the mortgage on your house.
Oh, totally different.
Yeah.
That's the critical thing to understand from the get-go.
Yeah.
If you think you know how mortgages work because you bought a house once, you really need to just kind of throw that knowledge out the window. CMBS is a different beast entirely.
So we are going to strip this whole thing down to the studs. We have a massive stack of source material here. I mean, we've got technical documentation, we have industry definitions, structural classifications, legal frameworks. We are going to use all of this to decode how a billion-dollar mall gets funded, who gets paid, and maybe most importantly,
what happens when the money stops flowing.
Exactly.
And it's a journey, honestly. We're going to go from like the basement plumbing of tax law, which is surprisingly dramatic.
I'm intrigued already.
All the way up to the penthouse where the masters of the universe sit and make these decisions that affect entire neighborhoods, entire cities.
Okay, so let's start at square one, the absolute basics. We've got these documents in front of us. How does the source material actually define a CMBS?
At its simplest level, and this is the starting point, the source defines a commercial mortgage-backed security as a type of mortgage-backed security that is secured by, and this is the key phrase, commercial and multifamily mortgages.
Okay. Commercial and multifamily. I want to stop there immediately because that feels like the huge fork in the road. We need to contrast this with what most people know, which is RMBS.
Residential mortgage-backed securities.
Right. And I really feel like we can't overstate this distinction. When people hear MBS or mortgage-backed security, their brains go straight to The Big Short. Right?
Yeah, 2008.
They think about 2008. They think about all those suburban houses in Florida or California. But we are not talking about single-family homes with a white picket fence and a golden retriever in the yard. We are talking about business assets.
That is the fundamental divide. And that's really, section one of our deep dive today. You have to understand that you cannot treat these two things, residential and commercial, the same way. Yeah, they are. They're different species.
So let's break down that asset class distinction a bit more. When we talk about the residential side, the RMBS, what are we really looking at? What's in that bundle?
In an RMBS deal, the bundle or the pool of loans is made up of home loans. So you're thinking of, 1,000, maybe 5,000, just regular people.
Regular homeowners.
Yeah, they live in the suburbs. They have 30-year mortgages. And the mechanism's pretty simple, right? The investors who buy those bonds, they benefit from the mortgage payments and the interest that's paid by all those homeowners every month.
So effectively, if I buy a residential bond, I'm basically betting that John Smith in Ohio is going to keep his job.
Right.
And Jane Doe in Texas is going to keep her job, and they're both going to pay their bills on time.
Correct. You are betting on the creditworthiness of thousands of individuals. You are betting on the American homeowner.
Okay, but now, shift your gaze. Let's look at CMBS. The source material lists some examples. What are they?
Office buildings, retail stores, shopping centers, and apartment complexes.
And this leads us to what the source called in the cash flow nuance. And this is something I really want to dig into because it just feels like it changes how you have to assess the risk of the whole thing.
It changes everything.
Why is an apartment complex or a shopping mall fundamentally different from John Smith's house?
Well, it all comes down to where the money is coming from. In a residential loan, the source of the payment is usually a salary. You go to work, you get a paycheck, you pay the bank. It's personal income.
Simple enough.
But with CMBS, the source explicitly states that the security provides investors with cash flow from the income these properties generate.
Ah, so the building itself has to earn its own keep.
It has to have a job. It's an economic entity. An apartment complex isn't just a place to sleep. It's a rental business. An office building is a space leasing business. A shopping mall is a retail hub.
So if the businesses inside the building fail, the loan itself fails.
That's the risk. It feels like a massive shift in mindset, right? You're not betting on a person's moral obligation to pay for their shelter. You are betting on the economic viability of a specific business model.
You're analyzing a business. If you lend money to a shopping mall, you couldn't care less about the owner's salary.
You don't care at all.
Yeah.
You care about, is the Gap selling enough jeans? Is the food court busy on a Saturday? Are people still physically going to malls, or are they just shopping on Amazon?
Which means the risk is tied to the broader economy in a much, much more direct and volatile way.
And that leads right to the next point in the source material: complexity and volatility. The source makes a really specific claim here. It says that CMBS tend to be more complex and volatile than residential securities.
That might sound counterintuitive to some people. You'd think a massive skyscraper is somehow safer than just some random house in the suburbs. So why does the source say it's more volatile?
It's because of, and this is a quote, the unique nature of the underlying property assets. Think about housing for a second. It's kind of commoditized.
Standardized.
It's a standardized product.
Yeah.
A 3-bedroom house in a suburb of Dallas is economically very, very similar to a 3-bedroom house in a suburb of Atlanta. The risks are similar. The buyer profile is similar. You can model it pretty easily.
But commercial properties?
They're snowflakes.
Yeah.
Every single one is unique.
Can you give me an example of that snowflake nature, just to make it concrete?
Sure. Take a hotel on Miami Beach versus, say, a cold storage warehouse in North Dakota.
Okay.
Both are commercial real estate. But the hotel relies on tourism, on the weather, on discretionary spending, airline ticket prices, travel trends.
A million different inputs.
A million.
Oh.
The warehouse, on the other hand, it relies on logistics supply chains, maybe agricultural yields from the surrounding farms, or trucking routes and fuel costs.
And a shopping mall in Ohio faces totally different risks than a high-rise office tower in Manhattan.
Completely different worlds.
Yeah.
If you own an office tower right now, you are worried about tech companies downsizing and the work-from-home trend.
Right. Is my building going to be empty?
But if you own that mall, you're worried about a big department store like Macy's going bankrupt and leaving a giant hole in your property. Each property is a unique business entity with its own management team, its own specific list of tenants, and its own local economic drivers.
So you can't just run a simple algorithm across 10,000 of them and say, this is a safe bet. You have to actually understand the story of each building.
You do, which makes the securitization, the bundling of all these different loans, so much more complex.
Yeah.
You're trying to bundle together a lot of very, very different stories into one portfolio.
Okay, so we have established the playing field. We're dealing with business assets, not homes. They are complex, they're unique, they rely on cash flow, not salaries. Now, I want to get into the mechanics. How do they actually build this machine? And that brings us to section 2 of our outline, the structure.
This is where we get into the plumbing. And I'll warn you, it sounds technical, but it's actually fascinating because it's designed to solve a huge fundamental problem.
I saw a term in the source material that it immediately stuck out to me. It sounds like a character from a sci-fi movie or maybe a piece of heavy artillery. The REMIC.
The REMIC, yes. It stands for a Real Estate Mortgage Investment Conduit.
A conduit. That is such an interesting word choice. A conduit is just a pipe, right? Something flows through it.
That is the perfect visualization, and you should absolutely hold on to that. The source explains that the typical structure for these securitizations is a REMIC, which isn't a company in the traditional sense. It's a creation of tax law.
Okay, hold on. Why do they need a special creation of tax law? Why can't a bank just put a bunch of loans in a bucket, call it the Big Bucket of Loans Incorporated, and then sell shares in it?
They could, but they would immediately run into a giant wall called double taxation.
And I want to stick on this for a second because I feel like this is where regular people's eyes just glaze over, but it's actually the entire reason this market can even exist.
It is. It's the linchpin. Think about it like this. If you and I start a regular business, let's say it's a lemonade stand, and that business makes a profit,
Okay.
the IRS taxes that profit. That's corporate tax.
Right. Step one, the business pays tax on what it made.
Then, from the money that's left over, we pay ourselves a dividend. We take that profit home. The IRS then taxes us on that income. That's personal income tax.
So the same dollar got taxed twice, once when the business earned it and a second time when I put it in my pocket.
Exactly. And for a lemonade stand, maybe that's annoying, but it's fine. But if you're trying to move billions of dollars in mortgage interest payments around the globe, it's a complete deal breaker.
It kills the return.
Completely. Wall Street looked at that and said, we cannot lose 21% or 30% or whatever the rate is of the yield just because the money sat in a holding company for 5 minutes. It makes the entire investment unappealing.
So they needed a loophole.
Well, maybe not a loophole, but a very specific vehicle, the REMIC. And the source notes that the REMIC is a pass-through entity. It is not subject to tax at the trust level.
So it's basically a ghost.
It's a robot that the IRS agrees to ignore. As long as that robot follows a very, very strict set of rules, it can't run a business, it can't buy new buildings, it can only passively hold these specific loans, the IRS just pretends it doesn't exist.
The tax liability just passes through it.
Passes right through to the investors. So the money flows from the mall owner into the REMIC and straight out to the bondholder, and the REMIC itself doesn't take a cut for taxes. It's just a pipeline.
A pure conduit.
And that efficiency is what makes the math work for everyone.
That makes a ton of sense. It's all about preserving the yield for the investor.
Speaking of yield, getting paid, let's talk about the interest rates. The source breaks this down into two main buckets, fixed rate and floating rate.
Right. And this is all about how the investor actually gets the return. Fixed seems simple enough. It's a standard percentage. You know what you're getting.
Yeah. You buy the bond says, I will pay you 5% a year. Simple, predictable, easy to model. But the floating rate is where things get a bit more dynamic. The source says this is based on a benchmark plus a spread.
And it mentions a couple of specific benchmarks, LIBOR or Euribor.
Right. The London Interbank offered rate and the Euro Interbank offered rate. Now, we should also mention that those specific benchmarks have been evolving and changing over time, but the concept is what really matters.
The concept is that the interest rate moves. It floats.
Exactly. So if the benchmark rate in the wider economy goes up, the bond starts paying more. If it goes down, the bond pays less.
And this connects directly to the loan term categories that are mentioned in the text. You have to ask yourself, why would a borrower choose a floating rate versus a fixed rate? What's the strategy?
I noticed that distinction in the source, too. It separates things into, like, the long game versus the short game.
Let's look at the longer-term loans first. The source defines these as 5 years or longer, and these are typically for the stabilized properties.
And what does stabilized mean in this context?
Imagine a big, shiny office building in Chicago. It's fully built. It's 95% full of tenants. All the leases are signed for 10 years with big, credit-worthy companies. It's basically a boring, steady money printer. So that owner, they want certainty. They don't want any surprises.
Right. They want a fixed rate. They want to know exactly what their mortgage payment is going to be for the next 10 years so they can budget their profit margins perfectly. They lock it in and forget about it.
But then you have the shorter-term loans. The source says 1 to 3 years.
These are for the transitional properties. Let's say you're a developer named Bob, and Bob buys an empty, rundown warehouse. It's got no tenants. It's ugly. Bob's plan is to renovate it and turn it into hip, new loft apartments.
So Bob doesn't want a 10-year loan on an empty building.
No, because Bob doesn't plan to own it for 10 years. He plans to fix it up in, say, 18 months, get it fully leased up with tenants, and then either sell it for a profit or refinance into a better long-term loan.
So he needs flexibility.
He needs flexibility. So he takes a short-term floating rate loan. He takes on the risk that interest rates might go up in the short term because what he really needs is the ability to get out of the loan easily.
And the source notes a key difference in that flexibility, too. It says the shorter loans usually allow free early repayments.
Right. So if Bob finishes his renovation project in 12 months instead of 18, He could just pay off the loan and walk away. No penalty.
But the longer-term loans,
Okay.
those fixed-rate ones, that is a completely different story. And this brings us right to Section 3, the lockout.
This is where the CMBS market gets really, really aggressive. This is where those finance glasses start to reveal some pretty heavy-duty handcuffs on the borrower.
The source sets up a scenario here that I think everyone can understand. In a regular home loan, generally you can pay it off early. If you win the lottery or you inherit some money, you just write a check to the bank, you pay off your mortgage, and you have a party. You own your home free and clear.
Right. Banks generally have to accept your money. I mean, there might be a tiny administrative fee or something, but prepayment is a right for most homeowners.
But the source states, many American CMBS transactions carry less prepayment risk than other MBS types.
Now, less prepayment risk is it's classic banker speak. It sounds like a positive thing. But what it actually means, from the borrower's perspective, is you are literally not allowed to pay us back.
Wait, pause on that. That sounds insane. Why would a lender be mad about getting their money back early? If I lend you $100 and you give it back to me tomorrow, I should be happy. The risk is gone.
But you're thinking like a person, not like an investor. Remember, these loans are all chopped up into bonds. So imagine you're a pension fund manager. You have a legal obligation to pay retirees for the next 10 years. You buy a 10-year CMBS bond because it promises you a steady 5% yield for a decade. You are counting on that specific cash flow.
Okay, I see. I built my entire financial model, my budget, around that 5% check coming in every single month for 10 years.
Exactly. Now, what happens if the borrower pays the loan off in year 2? Suddenly you have your principal cash back. Great, right?
No.
No, because now you have a giant pile of cash, but maybe in the meantime, interest rates have dropped. You can't just go out and find another safe 5% return. Maybe the market is only offering 3% now.
So I have reinvestment risk. I lost my great deal, and now I can't meet my obligations to my pensioners.
You lost your yield. And Wall Street hates losing yield. So the entire system is rigged to prevent that from happening. And the source outlines the specific mechanisms for this. It's called call protection. And the first and most blunt line of defense is the lockout provision.
Which sounds exactly like what it is.
It is. The source states it's typically a period of, say, 1 to 5 years where there can be no prepayment of the loan at all. Period.
So even if I have the cash sitting in a suitcase and I walk into the bank and say, here, I want to clear my debt,
The master servicer will politely return your check. They will say, I'm sorry, we contractually cannot accept this. You are locked out. You must stay in debt.
that is just wild. You are forced to keep paying interest you don't want to pay. But what about after that initial period? Or in different structures? The source mentions two terms that sound incredibly technical: defeasance and yield maintenance.
These are the golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
Let's look at defeasance first, because it is honestly one of the most bizarre concepts in all of finance if you haven't seen it before.
It sounds like a spell from a fantasy novel. I cast defeasance.
It's effectively a financial transmutation spell. Let's say you own a mall. You're in year 6 of a 10-year loan. You want to sell the mall to a new owner, so you need to clear the debt off the property. But you have a defeasance clause. You can't just pay off the loan.
So what do I have to do?
You have to perform a substitution. The source calls it a pledge of substitute collateral. Here's how it works in practice. You, the borrower, have to go out into the open market and buy a whole portfolio of U.S. government securities, treasury bonds, basically.
Oh, okay, that seems weird, but all right.
And not just any bonds. You have to hire a team of accountants and lawyers to construct a custom portfolio of government bonds where the interest and principal payments from those bonds perfectly match to the penny and to the day, the mortgage payments you owed on your original loan for the remaining 4 years.
Wait, so I have to build a synthetic version of my own mortgage using super safe government debt?
You are cloning your debt obligations. You buy this custom portfolio of bonds, you hand them over to the trustee, the CMBS deal. The trustee says, okay, these bonds are now the collateral for the loan. The mall is released, the lien is lifted, you can sell your mall.
But the loan technically still exists. It's still out there.
The loan lives on. But now, instead of being paid by the rent from the GAB and the food court, it is being paid by the full faith and credit of the U.S. Treasury Department.
That sounds incredibly expensive and complicated.
Expensive and complicated is an understatement. It can cost tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars just in legal and accounting fees to set this up. Plus, buying that specific portfolio of bonds is almost always more expensive than just paying off the loan principal. It's a massive, massive headache.
So why on earth would anyone do it?
Because it is the only way out of the handcuffs. And from the investor's perspective, it's amazing. Their risky loan that was backed by a dying mall just turned into a super safe loan backed by the U.S. government. Their credit rating goes up. Their yield is absolutely secure. It's a huge win for them.
It really seems like the borrower is forced to take all the pain so that the investor feels none of it.
That is the fundamental design of the machine.
And yield maintenance is the other term that was mentioned. I assume that's something similar.
It's simpler, but it can be just as painful. It's basically just a math formula. The lender says to the borrower, okay, you can pay us off now, but you have to write us a check for a penalty. And that penalty is calculated to be equal to the present value of all the interest the investor would have made if the loan had stayed open until its maturity date.
So it's basically, you can leave the party early, but you still have to pay us for all the drinks we expected you to buy for the rest of the night.
Exactly. You are maintaining their yield. Either way, they get their money.
And interestingly, the source notes a regional difference here. It says that European CMBS issues typically have less prepayment protection than American ones.
Yeah, the American market is just uniquely aggressive about locking borrowers in. In Europe, the market's developed a bit differently, often with more flexibility, like allowing for simple percentage-based prepayment penalties. But if you are financing a big commercial property in America, get ready for the golden handcuffs.
Okay, so we know the asset, these unique business properties. We know the vessel, the REMIC tax robot. We know the rules. You can't leave the party early. Now, I want to talk about the people who are actually running this show. This brings us to Section 4, the cast of characters.
This is one of the most important parts of the source material because it really breaks down the hierarchy. A CMBS trust isn't a building with people in it. It's a stack of legal contracts.
Yeah.
But real human beings have to execute those contracts.
And the source lists them in a very specific order. Let's go through them and try to give them a bit of a personality. First up on the list, the master servicer.
The master servicer. I think of them as the algorithm, the day-to-day manager.
And the source says their responsibility is to service the loans in the pool through to maturity. What does service mean?
It means they do all the boring administrative work. They're the ones sending out the monthly bills, they collect the checks, they make sure the property taxes are paid on time, they check that the building has the right insurance coverage, they manage the constant flow of data from the borrower to the trust.
And the source specifically notes they interact with the performing borrower.
That is the key phrase, performing. As long as you are a good boy, as long as you pay your bill on time, the only entity you will ever talk to is the master servicer.
And what's that interaction like?
It's very impersonal. They're usually a massive financial institution, like a big bank. It's a volume game for them. They have software that's processing thousands and thousands of loans at once. They are not your friend.
Okay, so next on the list is the primary servicer, or sometimes called the sub-servicer. How is that different from the master?
Well, the master servicer might be a giant bank headquartered in North Carolina, but the building itself is a little strip mall in Oregon. The master servicer doesn't know the local market in Oregon.
So they need someone with boots on the ground.
Exactly. The source points out that the primary servicer is often the loan originator or mortgage banker who sourced the loan. It's the local guy who actually sold the deal in the first place.
Ah, so the local relationship guy, the one who knows the borrower.
Yes. The master servicer officially subcontracts duties to them. The master is the ultimate boss, but the primary servicer is the one who is actually going to pick up the phone when the borrower calls to ask a simple question. They maintain that direct relationship.
Okay, so those are the good times people, the folks you talk to when everything is going exactly according to plan. But then the source introduces a character that sounds a bit more intense, the special servicer.
Ah, yes. The special servicer, the fixer, the wolf, the closer.
The source says they only step in upon certain specified events, and the main one is a default.
This is the critical handoff. This is the moment the entire mood in the room changes. In a regular bank loan, if you get into trouble, you go talk to your local loan officer, the guy you play golf with, and you say, hey, times are tough, can we work something out?
And usually the bank wants to help you because they don't want to end up owning your house.
Right. They want to avoid foreclosure. But in CMBS, it is completely different. The moment you miss a payment or a major tenant goes bankrupt, what they call a trigger event, the master servicer takes your file, stamps it default, and sends it down the hall to the special servicer.
What is their role exactly? What's their mandate?
The source calls them the handler of defaulted loans. Their job is not to be your friend. Their one and only job is to maximize the financial recovery for the bondholders. That's it.
So they are the ones who make the hard decisions. Do we foreclose? Do we try to sell the building for scrap?
Exactly. Or do we try to restructure the loan? Do we find a new owner? And the source mentions they have approval authority over material actions, like loan assumptions. This is important. Even if the loan isn't in default, if the borrower wants to do something big, like sell the building and have the new owner take over the existing debt, the master servicer usually can't say yes on their own.
They have to ask permission.
They have to get approval from the special servicer.
Why? If the loan is performing, why does the fixer get to have a say?
Because the special servicer is often tied directly to the financial risk. And we'll get to that in the next section. But usually, the special servicer is appointed by the investor who stands to lose the most money if things go wrong. So they want strict oversight on any major decision that could change the risk profile.
So if the master servicer is the polite but robotic accountant.
The special servicer is the guy who shows up with a tow truck and a clipboard.
That's a great analogy. So when a loan file goes to special servicing, everyone in the industry knows that property is in the ICU. It is a major distress signal.
A huge red flag.
Okay, moving on down the list, we have the trustee. This sounds very official.
The trustee is the librarian, the custodian of the documents.
The source says their primary role is to hold all the loan documents.
And it sounds passive, and it largely is, but it's a legally vital role. They are the ones who physically or digitally hold the original loan notes, the mortgages, the title deeds. They are the official safe deposit box for the entire deal.
And the source also says they distribute payments received from the master servicer to the bondholders.
Right, so they're also the cashier. The master servicer collects all the money from all the different malls and office buildings, sends one giant check to the trustee, and the trustee looks at the master spreadsheet and sends out all the individual checks to the hundreds of different investors. They keep the score.
And they make sure the pooling and servicing agreement, which is like the constitution for the trust, is being followed.
That's their main job. But the source notes that while they have this broad authority, they typically delegate actual work to the servicers.
They're not getting their hands dirty.
No. The trustee doesn't want to manage buildings or foreclose on properties. They're usually the trust department of a big bank. They just want to ensure the legal and financial structure remains intact and everyone follows the rules.
And finally, the last character on the list, the rating agency.
The referees. Or maybe the book critics. The source says there can be as few as one or as many as four of them involved in a single securitization.
And their job is to establish bond ratings for each bond class when the deal is first created.
Right, AAA, AA, ABBB, and so on. These little letters are incredibly powerful. They determine the interest rate on the bond and, more importantly, who is even allowed to buy these bonds.
How so?
Well, a lot of big institutions like pension funds or insurance companies have rules in their charters that say they're only allowed to buy the safest AAA-rated bonds. So the rating agency is effectively the gatekeeper to the largest pools of money in the world.
But the source points out an important ongoing duty. They don't just rate it once and then walk away.
No, absolutely not. They have to monitor pool performance. They are constantly watching the data that's coming from the master servicer every month.
So if that big mall in Ohio loses its anchor tenant,
The rating agency sees that data point. They might run their models and issue a downgrade. They can turn a AAA bond into an AA bond overnight.
and that would send shockwaves through the market?
Huge shockwaves. Because suddenly that big pension fund that was holding the bond might be legally required to sell it because it's no longer AAA. This can cause the price of the bond to plummet. It's a constant feedback loop.
So it's this rigid, highly structured ecosystem. The master servicer collects data, gives it to the trustee and the rating agencies, who then tell the investors what's happening with their money. And if things go really wrong, the special servicer steps in to clean up the mess.
It is a machine made of contracts. No one can just make a call based on a gut feeling. You have to follow the documents, always.
But there is one character we haven't fully fleshed out yet, and we kind of hinted at it when we talked about the special servicer. This brings us to our final section, Section 5, the power dynamic, and specifically, the B-piece buyer.
This is where the rubber really meets the road. If you want to understand who really runs the commercial real estate market, who calls the shots when things get tough, you have to understand the B piece.
The source introduces a very powerful sounding term, the directing certificate holder, which is also called the controlling class.
Controlling class. I mean, just think about that name. This is the entity that is in control. This is the one that directs the action.
And who are they? The source says they are the investor in the most subordinate bond class.
Okay, stop there. Does that make any sense to you on its face?
Honestly, no. It sounds completely backwards. It's counterintuitive.
Why? What's your instinct?
My instinct is that usually the person with the most money, the VIP, the one who bought the safest, most expensive AAA-rated bond, they should be the one in charge. If I buy the first-class ticket, I expect to have some say. But here, the source is saying the subordinate class, the one at the very bottom of the pile, is the controlling class.
It is deeply counterintuitive. But it is actually a brilliant, if maybe ruthless, design feature of the entire system.
All right, explain it to me. Who is this BP buyer? What are they buying?
They are the investors who purchase the B-rated, BB-rated, and sometimes the unrated classes of the CMBS deal. These are the bonds that are dead last in line to get paid.
So these are the junk bonds of the deal.
Essentially, yes. They are high risk and therefore high yield. We call this the first loss position. I want you to imagine a waterfall.
Okay.
The money for the mortgage payments pours in at the very top of the waterfall. The AAA investors, who are at the top, they fill their buckets first. Then the water flows down to the AA guys, and they fill their buckets. Then the A guys. The BP buyer is standing at the very, very bottom, holding a thimble and hoping there is still some water left when it gets to them.
So if the building starts to lose money, if some tenants stop paying rent and the waterfall shrinks?
The water flow dries up before it ever reaches the bottom. The BP's buyer is the very first one to stop getting paid. If the trust loses, say, $1 million in a year, that entire $1 million comes directly out of the BP's buyer's pocket.
And the AAA investors at the top.
They don't feel a thing. They are completely insulated from that first loss. They don't start losing money until the B piece, the BB piece, and all the other subordinate layers are completely wiped out.
Okay, I get the risk now. But that still doesn't explain the power. Why does that risk give them control? Why do we give the keys to the car to the guy who is most likely to go broke?
Because of one of the most powerful concepts in finance, skin in the game. Think about it. If the building loses 5% of its value, who cares the most?
The B piece guy. He's losing his shirt. That 5% loss could wipe out his entire investment.
Exactly. Now, does the AAA guy care about that 5% loss?
Not really. He's still fully covered. He's got, 30% or 40% of subordination below him protecting him like a giant cushion.
The AAA guy is asleep at the wheel. He has absolutely no incentive to micromanage the property because he's safe. But the BP's buyer, he is sweating bullets over every single percentage point of occupancy, every leaky roof, every late rent check.
His survival depends on it.
His survival depends on it. So the structure says, you, the BP's buyer, have the most to lose. Therefore, you get to be the one who decides how we handle the problems.
You're the most motivated person in the entire room to save the building.
Exactly. And the source says they have significant influence over the trust, specifically by directing the special servicer.
In fact, I've read in other places that very often the B-piece buyer is the one who appoints the special servicer.
Or they are the special servicer.
Yeah.
Often these are the exact same firms. You'll have specialized hedge funds or private equity groups that buy the BP specifically so that they can gain control of the workout process if and when the loans go bad.
That is just fascinating. It's like saying, since you are the one sitting on the hood of the car with no seatbelt, you get to be the one who drives.
Or, since you are the canary in the coal mine, you're the one who gets to decide when we evacuate. It aligns the power with the risk.
So let's try to unpack the so what here. We've covered a lot of really technical ground. We've gone from the basic definition of CMBS all the way to the tax structures, the lockout penalties, the whole cast of servicers, and now the B-piece buyers.
We have really dissected the machine.
So let's go back to that street corner, the one
Yeah.
we started on at the very beginning of this. You're standing there and you put on the finance glasses. You look up at that same skyline. What do you see now?
I don't just see a skyscraper anymore. I see a pass-through entity. I see a massive bundle of legal contracts that are only held together by a specific exemption in the tax code.
When I look at that office tower now, I realize that building isn't just owned by some simple landlord. It's being managed day to day by a master servicer algorithm that's probably located in a different state.
Right, and it's being watched like a hawk every single month by a rating agency in New York.
And if you look really, really closely at the windows, you start to realize that the person who really controls the ultimate fate of that building isn't the property manager sitting in the lobby. It's the B-piece buyer. Some hedge fund in Connecticut that bought the riskiest slice of the debt and is now holding the directing certificate.
It completely changes your perspective on the stability of the city. We think of buildings as permanent. They're made of concrete and steel. They're solid. But financially, they're incredibly fluid. They're tied to global interest rates, to the bond markets, to the whims of a special servicer who is controlled by the most subordinate investor.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on as you walk through your city. We talked at length about the special servicer, the fixer. They only take control when things go bad. When the economy tanks, when tenants leave in droves, when borrowers default on their loans.
The default cycle.
Exactly. Now think about the world we're in right now. We have the rise of remote work, which is emptying out office buildings. We have online shopping, which is killing traditional malls. If we hit a major recession, or if the way we use real estate just fundamentally changes for good, that means defaults.
A lot of defaults, which means a lot of those trigger events are going to happen.
And that means the master servicers are contractually obligated to hand the keys to the special servicers.
That is the logical flow of the machine. It's what it's designed to do.
So it really raises the question. In a serious downturn, who actually owns our cities? It's not the developers who built the towers. It's not the banks who originated the loans. It's the fixers. It's the special servicers.
You can see a massive transfer of control of commercial real estate where our skylines are essentially being managed by these distressed asset specialists purely for the purpose of salvaging whatever yield they can for the bondholders.
It is a sobering thought. The city itself becomes a recovery operation. Every for lease sign you see isn't just a sign, it's a desperate attempt to keep the B piece from hitting zero.
The skyline isn't just architecture anymore, it's a balance sheet. And right now, we all need to wonder who is holding the B piece.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden world of CMBS. It's complex, it's technical, but it's the invisible framework of the world we all live in.
Keep looking up and keep asking questions.